I am not dead. I am still very much alive. Invincible Super Review's in its editing stages right now. We'll try to work and finish that when I can. But for now, Dragon Ball. I'd be a fake nerd if I didn't love Dragon Ball. One of the all-time classics, regardless of whether it's early Dragon Ball, where Goku was a kid for most of it, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Z Kai. It's always a timeless and fantastic story in my heart, as well as millions of others in the world. And a fair chunk of those same fans grew up with Dragon Ball video games. I was one of them. The cream of the crop back in the day typically being the Budokai Tenkaichi series, particularly 2 and 3 more than anything, at least to me, especially 3 in just the roster alone. Dragon Ball content on this channel is completely brand new with this video. You guys are familiar with my gaming shtick more than anything, mostly Mario shenanigans, with a pinch of Sonic, Super Smash Bros., and Pokemon. First time for everything as far as franchises go. Video game wise, Dragon Ball has had an array of games over the generations. 3D arena fighters with multiple mechanics and structures, 2D arena fighters, full 2D fighting games, open world RPGs, but 3D arena fighter is often the trademark formula for Dragon Ball games, much like every other anime or manga video game out there. Most other games based on manga or anime, especially shonen, very often tend to take the 3D arena fighter approach. Naruto, My Hero Academia, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, One Piece, and don't get me wrong, some of these series have very fun, entertaining 3D arena fighting games, and they do break away from that formula with some of their own games, like One Piece often does Warriors/Musou games. But it's hard to pretend there isn't an oversaturation approaching an anime or manga video game, and not seeing multiple of them all over the place. Not all the time, but they're pretty common, and it does get kind of old, with not all of them being solid. It's one of the many reasons Dragon Ball FighterZ was so beloved when it was announced, it being a traditional 2D fighting game to break from that norm, forget how insanely good looking the game was. But Budokai Tenkaichi is a very special case. Dragon Ball's gotten multiple types of 3D games between the Raging Blast duology, Battle of Z, the Xenoverse duology, and technically the original Budokai games that preceded Tenkaichi. But outside FighterZ being a more relevant Dragon Ball game that would dabble in an uncommon genre of anime or manga video gaming, the most revered and celebrated titles for Dragon Ball would very often be the Budokai Tenkaichi series, a series that has been dormant for effectively 16 years. There was a DBZ game labeled Ultimate Tenkaichi in 2011, but don't be fooled by the English version's name, it being really dubbed as Ultimate Blast in other places in the world, including Japan, and especially looking at most of the gameplay assets, models, attacks, animations, voice clips, and other stuff, it largely derived from the Raging Blast games more than anything else, despite the core gameplay itself being unlike any other Dragon Ball game. But Budokai Tenkaichi has a legacy across Dragon Ball fans. It tried to stick true to the story in its single-player campaign, but the vast, massive, really padded out roster of characters, the fast-paced action gameplay, and options for counters, combos, dodges, super moves. No other Dragon Ball game that came after the Budokai Tenkaichi games don't capture that same magic and intensity these games do. I'm saying this as a guy who loves the Raging Blast games, by the way. Shout out to any Raging Blast fans watching this, but I know full well the BT games were where it was at. Budokai Tenkaichi 2 was my first Dragon Ball game ever, and got me to love the franchise even more. For any non-Dragon Ball fans in the audience, the best way I could describe these games is that the Raging Blast games are closer to compare to Super Smash Bros. Brawl or Smash 4 for that series, while the Budokai Tenkaichi series is the Super Smash Bros. Melee of Dragon Ball games. It really did have a more fast-paced nature to it and more stimulating gameplay options that weren't as fast or snappy in previous and later entries. It stood out considerably in the gameplay department. And despite how unpopular competitively 3D arena fighters are, the original Budokai trilogy was the closest thing to what would be more socially acceptable for an esports, since it's basically a Tekken version of Dragon Ball. Budokai Tenkaichi has always had a cult following of sorts. Most Dragon Ball fans have played it, It's the template series for either 3D anime arena fighters or the crown jewel of Dragon Ball video games, and there are a ton of people who adore these games. They've gotten fan bases growing with impressive fan mods adapting modern Dragon Ball material to it, but it's pretty easy to see why people have a fondness with the BT games when you sit down and play them compared to most of the Dragon Ball games. So you can only imagine how wild it is Budokai Tenkaichi 4 exists. I don't think this is a game a lot of Dragon Ball fans even thought would be possible in this day and age. The more recent titles are a lot slower, they're more focused around character customization, shoving in a lot more moves and abilities and ways you can mold established Dragon Ball characters as well as your own in a couple games. The story and entire universe or multiverse of Dragon Ball just keeps expanding and getting larger and bigger with even more characters, more universes. People were getting a little tired of every Dragon Ball game retelling the main story for a while, and we did get one like that and more with DBZ Kakarot, but with the way the Budokai Tenkaichi games were set up, printed out, and hallmarked in the fandom, it was hard to imagine an official Dragon Ball game continuing that lineage. But March 2023, following the end of the Dragon Ball FighterZ World Tour Finals, we got a tease at a new Budokai Tenkaichi game, using footage from the older games segueing into new proper footage, and it was a short tease of Goku going Super Saiyan Blue on Namek, but it was dubbed a new Budokai Tenkaichi game. It was literally a direct follow-up, the 4th Budokai Tenkaichi game. And just recently, the Game Awards passes, with one of the trailers and reveals being a better gameplay look at that game. Goku and Vegeta brawling each other in the rocky fields before they both go blue, and they cut to Frieza and Cannon Broly and other characters. Like, I don't think it's easy to fully understand the hype and excitement if you didn't grow up with or just play these games. This game's existence for Bandai Namco and Dragon Ball fans is if Sega gave us a legitimate and really good, official Sonic Adventure 3. This is Dragon Ball fans' Sonic Adventure 3, basically. That's probably the best analogy you can make for how childishly giddy millions are anticipating this series continuing. I am one of those children, and the game looks phenomenal. Visually, the art style's basically more or less on par with Fighters, looking at the character models. The expressions, the animations, the blasts and attacks, the characters look amazing. The insane level of texturing on the fields, Namek, the lighting, the super dynamic camera angles. Like, this looks exactly what I'd imagine a modern Budokai Tenkaichi game to look like, or an action-packed modern Dragon Ball game, period. It really does feel like I'm looking at Fighters if it was designed in a full 3D space. And they're doing a bang-up job thus far. This also seems to be the first BT game bringing its Japanese name in full over to the localized versions. The Budokai Tenkaichi trilogy, they were called Sparking, Sparking Neo, and Sparking Meteor respectively for BTs 1, 2, and 3, but this 4th one's called Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So the naming convention completely sticks, it checks out, but we're seeing it stick with the English versions now, which is an interesting turnout. I'm hoping it doesn't backfire marketing-wise, considering this is supposed to be Budokai Tenkaichi 4. I don't think it'll matter that much or backfire that much. So far, Bandai Namco's cooking extremely well with this game. Don't let this being my first Dragon Ball video fool you. I love this franchise and I grew up with BT 2 and 3. Both of which being really good Dragon Ball games. I am mad excited for Sparking Zero. We're gonna call it Sparking Zero from here on out. But this is definitely a game with S-tier levels of hype and S-tier adoration for its predecessors. Absolutely no doubt. Millions of Dragon Ball fans are gassing this game up for good reason. But there are 3 main questions that come up with this game, with 2 of them I think mattering a lot more. The least important question being the release date, because they teased this game way back in March 2023. We're on the cusp of 2024, and this new gameplay trailer just dropped like 2 days ago. But I'm more patient than I am cautious, because like I said, even if for anecdotal purposes, this is Dragon Ball fans' equivalent to Sonic Adventure 3, for Sonic fans if that existed. Bandai Namco has to know. There's no way they don't know. The BT games have such a popular legacy behind them. These specific expectations and wishes with the Budokai Tenkaichi or Sparking name backing them up. People expect the fast, high-energy fights, the over-bloated roster and all that. Main story campaign too, probably, but the roster of characters and the general gameplay are the key ones. They would have to take as much time, budget and energy into a project like this as they could afford, which they 100% can. Namco's a stupid big company with so many different teams and sources working on so many different games at once, especially with their anime titles. Dragon Ball is their most popular one in that regard, and the history of these games automatically brings high expectations and standards to the table. Considering all of this in mind, they could push this back to 2025 or 2026 for all I care. I want them to take as much time as possible on delivering on this game the best way they know how. There is an entire ocean filled with hype that they'd have to be aware of greenlighting this game in the first place. It looks phenomenal thus far. Don't rush it. I don't need this game immediately in 2024. You could stand to polish and go balls deep if you need that year or 2025 and beyond. But I don't think the interest of this game will die down if the gameplay, scope, and presentation of it all lives up to that anticipation. And thus far, it is. The presentation especially, like, it looks so damn good. Gameplay, almost as much. They're hitting the notes so far. The combos and strings, knocking your opponent hard and far. You can after-image dodge heavy blows, one after another, after another, after another, just like in previous BT games. Now, you can deflect Ki Blasts and Super Ki Blasts, like in the Raging Blast games. The transformations are a lot more cinematic, as well as characters' super attacks and planet destructions, the latter being another BT mechanic. I'm hoping it'll be a little faster in general than what we're seeing now, but the pacing and options at your disposal are meeting the expectations thus far. But the second question, I personally think is the biggest one, I think a lot of us can agree on, is the character roster. Budokai Tenkaichi is both famous and infamous for having unbelievably massive, like stupidly huge character rosters. Literally humongous glossary of Dragon Ball characters to choose from. Duplicates of multiple characters. There are like several different Gokus and Vegetas in those games. Non-BT games do it too, but the BT games did it the most. A lot of characters shared the same super moves across ki volleys, energy waves, attack and punching animations. Like, you could tell where they cut corners and why they managed to squeeze so many more characters into each installment. So obviously, they can't really do that with this new installment being several generations fresher than games like those preceding 3 entire console generations under dated engines and hardware. This is why it felt like it was hard to believe we'd ever get a new Budokai Tenkaichi game, because the roster has to be massive. Like, the BT games' rosters went from 60 characters to 129 to frickin' 162 characters. Almost every BT game, more or less, doubled the roster. Again, they cut corners and repurposed a lot of assets with each game, but it's still insane they managed to cram that high of a body count at all. With a total modern new game, they'd have to do a lot of that from scratch. A lot of work, modeling, animating, money, effort, time, etc. But now that they're going all in, everyone's expecting a big-ass roster again, which is still fair when you boil it down. Personally speaking, this is going to sound ungrateful or overreaching normally, but fair in the context of the BT games. I'm kind of hoping at the very least the roster's going to be 100 characters. I look back at the Raging Blast 2 roster in particular, and how that game had a lot of characters across the main story and movies / non-canon material, and the Raging Blast games focused a lot more on character and attack customization as well, which I personally really like, given there were more types of attacks than in the BT games, plus negating the need to make 3 different Gokus for 3 different points during the original DBZ story. Now 4 or 5 if you factor Super. Trunks, Vegeta, or Gohan are one thing, but Goku in particular is another, unless we're adding GT Goku or original Dragon Ball Goku. But we get a better glimpse at some of that roster with the gameplay teaser we just got. Vegeta, Frieza, Broly, Piccolo, Krillin, Tien, Yamcha, Cell Arc Future Trunks, 18, Cell, Mr. Satan, Majin Buu, Dragon Ball Super Future Trunks, Bergamo, 17, Jiren, a lot of mainstays and core characters to many arcs, but Mr. Satan and Bergamo in particular are far and away the standouts in this lightning sizzle reel. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, there are not many Dragon Ball games I played after Ultimate Tenkaichi. I don't think Mr. Satan is playable in a lot of modern Dragon Ball video games. He was a playable character in the original Budokai games, as well as the Budokai Tenkaichi series, and several other older titles. Joe character, he didn't phase opponents at all and had hilariously stupid super moves, but he was a playable character regardless. And this trailer heavily implies he's keeping that tradition again here. which is awesome. And Bergamo's kind of a punk nobody almost, who picks a fight with Goku before the Tournament of Power in Super, and him and his universe wind up being the first team out of the tournament. So by all means, he's like a C or D tier type of character in how important, impactful, or integral to the story or characters he is compared to most others. Almost as insignificant as a low-level Frieza soldier, basically. Not exactly that bad or that low, but he isn't that far off at all either. So it reads to me that they might be padding out the roster, and I do mean padding out in a good way. If they gotta cut corners or reuse stuff, go for it. It's no big deal. Big shocker, that's kind of a constant in-game development in general. It varies in how cheap or expansive and additive it becomes, but it's the norm. BT's done it before. I wouldn't blame them too hard if they did it here, given the series' pedigree and history, alongside if the roster does become stupidly huge. But Bergamo definitely sounds like a padding type of character to the roster, and I am all here for that. Plus, I almost forgot, Bergamo's whole shtick when he fought Goku in Super. Maybe in the second fight, but at very least, his first fight, he absorbs energy attacks to increase in size into a literal giant. So there's a solid chance Bergamo being in this game soft confirms giant characters are going to be playable again, which is another Budokai Tenkaichi trademark that would make a lot of people happy. All the various great ape forms, Hirudegarn, Fat Janemba, Slug's final form, Cell Max, etc. If that's the case, then that's another W going for Sparking Zero, and it keeps the roster potential as broad as the previous games. So, I'm hoping alongside a lot of other main and important characters like Kid, Teen, Adult, and Ultimate Gohan, Beerus, Kid Buu, Hit, Ginyu, and all of them, alongside A and B tiers like Nappa, Zarbon, Dodoria, Android 19, Dr. Gero, and more, we still get a lot more A tier, B tier, and lower tier characters thrown in the mix. Goten, Trunks, Videl, Kui, the entire Ginyu Force, every Saiyan and villain transformation across both Z and Super, the Cybermen, Cell Juniors, Future Trunks in both the OG Sword version, the Cell Arc version, and then the Dragon Ball Super version. All the fusions, Gogeta, Gotenks, Vegito, Merged Zamasu, Kefla, etc., Caulifla, Kale, Kaba, Ribrianne, Gamma 1 and 2, Cooler, Dabura, Bobbity, King Cold, King Kai. Yo, King Kai would be absolutely awesome though. Both versions of Janemba, non-canon Broly, Whis, Android 13, 14, 15, Jocko, Zeno. Hell, if we get lucky, they might toss us a bone with some manga characters like Granola, Moro, and more. Maybe some GT characters, maybe some OG Dragon Ball characters, even if it is just Kid Goku. Like, the potential's 100% there. And there's so many characters you could pull from for a game like Budokai Tenkaichi. I don't know if they're going to go full hog wild with the roster, but Bergamo and Mr. Satan borderline confirm they're going to try to reach far and wide in those filler-like ways to some extent. And I do appreciate them trying at all. It's just how far they're going to go is the question. But at least it's not disappointing thus far. And the second major question, third question overall, single-player content. BT2 went full in on the main story and movies with a few what-if story arcs, but BT3 kind of did a Spark Notes version and highlighted the major battles of each respective arc more, and some of the movies. So I do have to wonder, are they going to go full-on like BT2, or do a Spark Notes version like BT3, or a split in between? Plus, the BT games also had other side modes as well than just the single-player campaign. Beyond that, in the multiplayer, there were tournament modes, going against characters or even other players in a bracket-style tournament, Ultimate Battle Z, this system where you select types of battles progressing up a pillar. A lot like Mortal Kombat, basically. Gauntlet challenge modes, fighting multiple characters in a row with limited HP and stuff like that. There were also character encyclopedias where you get backgrounds and information on them, a lot like Smash Brothers' trophies back in the day. Chi-Chi would even give her input and 2 cents on the characters in BT3. BT3 also had this mission mode of battles with specific conditions, Mission 100, a lot like Melee Brawler Smash 4's event modes. You have to assume the game's going to come with online in this day and age, a lot like Raging Blast in that regard. I think modes like all of that would help the game significantly in the long run and give some extra value for single-player fanatics especially. I wouldn't be too remiss if we only got a main campaign and multiplayer personally, but it also does depend what angle they're going to go for with the game, either being single-player heavy or more focused on polishing the gameplay and roster, which is the important thing. If we're lucky, they might have had time for both. But as far as single-player campaign, they could opt for the easier BT3 route, and I take it given the gameplay's living up to the hype and the roster teases are giving promising signs. Really small stuff. Praying we get interactive loading screens like BT3 in particular, Gohan pulling the Z sword, Yamcha spirit balling multiple breaks, etc. I'm sure the soundtrack for the game's gonna be solid. I don't think this is gonna happen, but oh my god, I would love a toggleable sound test that lets us play tracks across the entire Budokai Tenkaichi trilogy. I have such a soft spot for BT2 soundtrack in particular. It's a really good one. BT3's is very good too, but BT2 has the better one in my opinion. And I would love to hear its tunes in a brand new BT game alongside more old and new songs. And the obvious stages. Hoping for a good assortment of those. We got Namek, Destroyed Namek, and the Rocky Fields. I'm not too worried about stages, but I'm hoping for usual Plains, Destroyed Earth, Kame House, the City, a Cliff Highway, Hell, Universe 6 vs 7 Tournament Grounds, the Null Realm where the TOP took place, the World Martial Arts Tournament, Cell Games Arena, Kami's Lookout, Islands, the World of the Kais, Beerus' homeworld, the Snowy Tundra, Caves. Like, most of this is usually standard fare for most Dragon Ball games, to be honest, so I'm not really worried. Inside Buu coming back from the Budokai games would be really cool. Maybe a couple new stages like a Snake Way stage, or King Kai's planet, the Otherworld Tournament Grounds, the Exosphere where Goku fought Beerus at the peak of the Earth's atmosphere, basically, at the end of Battle of Gods. And it's not the old BT one where Frieza's ship's just looming over Earth. Maybe Gohan's house from Super, the ruined future from Dragon Ball Super, Orange Star High School, or Baseball Field because filler and why not. There's some room for more creative Dragon Ball stages a little bit. And of course, good online, good connection, and a traditional ranking system. Fighters got rollback netcode, so I am optimistic as far as online goes. But a lot of hopes and expectations are riding between the character roster and the core gameplay, both of which look extremely promising. Roster still has room to flesh out and expand, time will tell, and we have 2 solid signs of more things to come. Gameplay thus far is shaping up to be what a lot of us expect out of the series. Hope the soundtrack's good, hope we get more side modes, solid stages, good online and leaderboard rankings, and Budokai Tenkaichi 4 is a real game that is on the way. It's called Sparking Zero, but it truly is building itself up within the Budokai Tenkaichi lineage. And it is pulling it off based on the 2 teasers we have. But I'm not the first fan to preach. You could take your time with this one. This is a game that really should live up to the scale and hype millions have for it. I can bide my time until it comes, especially if it wounds up being a really damn fun game. I'm excited for it, for more teasers, for both the roster and seeing more gameplay. Let me know your thoughts down in those comments, and I'll catch you guys when they drop more deets on Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, be on the lookout for my Invincible Season 1 review. Trust me, I cooked. I really think I cooked with this review. You're gonna want to look out for that, and stay super.
Yo, hey, Menace, hey, 我来呀，共和，哈哈哈呀，拉面，嘿，来面。白哥面，共舞，再见呀！哈哈，麻面，上手面，谢谢。